You know, the first $10,000 feels completely impossible. And the first $100,000? Well, that feels even further away. Look, if you're early in your career, or maybe just starting down a new financial path, you probably know this frustration firsthand. Building that initial momentum feels literally like pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill. And honestly, it can leave you wondering if the whole system is just completely broken. But, as you'll see, something strange happens once you actually start building capital. Your money can eventually begin doing part of the work for you. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to break down the math and the psychology behind why getting off the starting line is absolutely the most brutal part of the journey, and why it really does eventually get easier.
Now, to be clear right up front, $100,000 isn't some magical universal threshold. Depending on where you live and what your personal goals are, your number might be completely different. The real challenge we're talking about here is the brutal transition from relying entirely on your own labor to generate income to finally building enough capital that your assets start generating their own returns. It's that massive shift from just working for money to actually having your money work for you. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to explore some core financial principles and a few hypothetical examples to really understand this friction. Now, keep in mind, we're looking at general strategies today, so this isn't individual financial advice. But by understanding the underlying mechanics of wealth building drawn from some of the world's leading financial thinkers, we can totally demystify why that first major milestone demands so much from us.
Section 1. The problem, and why starting is hard. So let's start with the hard math. Why does the beginning of this journey feel so impossibly slow? Well, it all comes down to the heavy headwinds you face early on. Think about it. When you're just starting out, your initial capital is near zero, and your earning power is usually at its lifetime lowest. Every single dollar you bring in immediately goes to war with competing living expenses. We're talking rent, food, student loans, transportation, the whole shebang. And to make matters worse, inflation is constantly in the background, eroding the purchasing power of whatever few dollars you do manage to actually set aside. So in the beginning, your limited earnings have to cover basic survival before any real wealth can actually be built. It is just a sheer mathematical grind.
Section 2. The agitation and the psychology of spending. But here's the thing, it's not just the math fighting against us. The problem gets compounded by human nature. Our own psychological biases make this grind exponentially harder, often without us even realizing it's happening. The historian Yuval Noah Harari made this brilliant observation. He said one of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. This is exactly what we call lifestyle creep. The very moment you get a raise, your baseline for what feels normal shifts. Suddenly, that nicer apartment, the better car, those premium monthly subscriptions, they quickly transition in your brain from a fun luxury to an absolute necessity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Scott Galloway, in his book The Algebra of Wealth, highlights this concept known as the hedonic treadmill. Notice how the line for spending goes up and up over time, but the baseline for happiness? It stays entirely flat. It's crazy, right? No matter how much apparent progress we make toward a financial goal, if our spending rises to match it, we remain in the exact same place. We are literally just spinning the treadmill faster and getting exhausted in the process.
And why do we let this happen? Well, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman hits the nail on the head. He points out a fatal flaw in human reasoning: hubris. Kahneman noted that most people genuinely believe they are superior to most others. Now, in personal finance, this manifests as a false confidence. We convince ourselves that we're the exception. We think we can simply out-earn our spending habits, or that we'll easily make up for it later when we're making real money. This overconfidence is exactly what keeps us trapped in the cycle.
Section 3. The pivot and betting on alternative futures.
To break out of this cycle and actually reach that first major milestone, we need a massive paradigm shift. We have to completely reframe how we view our daily spending and saving habits, because it's not just about budgeting, it's about how we view our future. This brings us to the insights of Annie Duke, author of the book Thinking in Bets. As a former professional poker player, Duke teaches that every single decision we make is essentially a bet on an alternative future. Choosing to spend money on something today is never an isolated event. It's a choice that explicitly forecloses on other potential futures. So the crucial point is this quote right here. We are betting against all the future versions of ourselves that we are not choosing. Think about that for a second. Every time you spend $1 on a passing luxury to satisfy that hedonistic treadmill, you are placing a literal bet against a wealthier, more secure, future version of yourself. You're choosing the present version over the future version. Recognizing this trade-off is absolutely the first step to changing your financial trajectory.
Section 4. The solve and the power of compounding. Once you shift that mindset and start prioritizing that future version of yourself, you unlock the ultimate solve to this whole problem, the mathematical magic of compounding. This is what eventually takes all that heavy lifting off your own shoulders. As author Morgan Housel emphasizes in his book, The Psychology of Money, good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns, it's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with for a very long time. When you rely purely on savings, your growth is linear. You save $1, you have $1, and that's exhausting because it requires constant, active effort from you. But when you invest those savings, you step into exponential growth. This is where your money makes money, and then those returns make their own returns. Sure, it starts off incredibly slow, almost imperceptibly so, which is exactly why the first $100,000 is such a slog. But eventually, the snowball effect takes over.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Scott Galloway uses this fantastic hypothetical example of an investment of a single $100 bill at an 8% return. Without compounding, say you're just adding $8 a year, you reach $340 after 30 years. But with compounding, where the interest actually earns interest, that $100 acorn grows into a $1,006 oak tree. It is the exact same initial effort, but a radically different outcome. This timeline shows the reality of the journey. In year 1, the return is so tiny it barely feels worth the sacrifice. Even by year 10, the growth is noticeable, but let's be honest, probably not life-changing. But by year 30, the exponential wealth curve goes almost completely vertical. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that actual investment returns will always vary because markets go up and down. But the fundamental principle remains the same. You must give your money decades of uninterrupted time to do the work. Time is the active ingredient here.
Section 5. The formula. The real wealth equation.
So, how do we bring all these behavioral and mathematical concepts together into a holistic, actionable strategy? Let's look at the actual equation for building long-term security. In his book, The Algebra of Wealth, Scott Galloway presents this ultimate formula. Wealth is not a lucky break. It is a consistent pattern of behavior. It is focus plus the multiplied combination of stoicism, time, and diversification. Let's break down exactly what each of these powerful levers means for your daily life.
First up is focus, which means increasing your earning power. The author Robert Greene points out that developing deep mastery in a field is how you maximize your value and your income. Second is stoicism, having the emotional discipline to avoid lifestyle inflation when that income finally increases. Third is time, leaving the money alone so compounding can actually do its magic. And fourth is diversification, investing for the long term to protect your capital from localized risks. When you execute all 4 of these, you create an unstoppable force. All of this effort drives toward one final destination, beautifully captured in this simple equation. Economic security equals passive income being greater than your burn rate. That is the finish line, when the money generated by your compounding capital finally outpaces the cost of your lifestyle. You have bought back your time and achieved true financial independence.
Conclusion. Playing the long game.
As we wrap up this explainer, let's bring it all back to where we started. The true challenge of early wealth building isn't a lack of information. It's a test of endurance. The hardest part isn't knowing what to do. The formula is out there for all of us. The real barrier is staying consistent long enough for the numbers to actually become meaningful. The first $100,000 is a brutal grind precisely because it demands immense stoicism. You're making sacrifices today while waiting years, even decades, for time to do its job. It requires betting on your future self when it would be so much easier to just reward your present self.
Which leaves us with a question to test your own current mindset. If you were handed an extra $10,000 tomorrow, completely out of the blue, what would you actually do with it? Would you invest it to fuel that compounding engine, save it as a buffer, or spend it to upgrade your lifestyle right now? Think carefully about your answer and why, because it reveals exactly how you are placing your bets against your future self. Thanks for exploring the math and psychology of wealth building with us. Keep your focus on the long game.